The gold band caught the morning light like a dying star, trembling in Sarah McKenna's palm as she held it toward the stranger on her porch. Her wedding ring, the only thing of value left in a world that had taken everything else. "My kids haven't eaten in 3 days," she whispered, her voice cracking like autumn leaves. "Can you buy my wedding ring?" The mountain man standing before her cabin door was a giant carved from shadow and silence. Ezra Blackwood had come down from the high country for supplies, his pack horse loaded with pelts and loneliness. He'd seen the smoke from her chimney and thought to ask for water. Instead, he found desperation wearing a calico dress. Behind Sarah, 2 small faces peered through the doorframe, a boy of maybe 8, a girl no more than 6. Their eyes held that hollow look Ezra recognized from his own childhood, the kind that comes when hope starts eating itself to survive. The boy's clothes hung loose as burial shrouds. The girl clutched a cornhusk doll with one arm missing. "Ma'am," Ezra's voice came out rougher than he intended, unused to conversation after months alone in the peaks. "I don't deal in jewelry." Sarah's hand closed around the ring, knuckles white as bone. "It's real gold. My late husband saved for 2 years to buy it." Her chin lifted with a pride that poverty couldn't quite kill. "I'm not asking for charity, mister. I'm offering fair trade." The autumn wind carried the scent of coming snow and something else, the sharp edge of winter that could kill as surely as any bullet. Ezra's eyes swept the property, a cabin with gaps in the chinking, a barn with a sagging roof, fields gone to weeds and regret. No livestock, no garden, no man's tools anywhere to be seen. "When's the last time you ate, ma'am?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." But Ezra could see the answer in the way she swayed idly, in how her dress had been taken in with careful stitches, in the quiet desperation that clung to this place like morning frost. He looked past her to the children, saw the boy's protective stance, the girl's silent tears. The mountain man shifted his weight, leather creaking. 20 years of solitude had taught him to read the language of survival, and this woman was speaking it fluent as a death rattle. "Keep your ring," Ezra said, shouldering his pack. "But I could use some work done." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She'd heard that tone before, seen that look in men's eyes when they thought a widow was easy prey. "What kind of work?" "Your barn's about to fall down. Roof needs patching, walls need shoring up." He gestured toward the sagging structure. "I'll work for meals and a place to stable my horse. Nothing more, nothing less." The boy stepped forward, thin shoulders squared. "We don't need your pity, mister." "Tommy, hush," Sarah warned. But her son's defiance sparked something in her eyes, the first sign of fire Ezra had seen. "No pity involved, boy. Just business." Ezra met Tommy's glare without flinching. "Your ma's got shelter. I've got skills. Fair trade, like she said." Sarah studied him with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to read men's intentions in the tilt of their hat, the set of their shoulders. This stranger was different, dangerous in the way that mountains were dangerous, not because they meant harm, but because they were immovable as stone and twice as hard. "You'd work for just food?" she asked. "Food we don't have." "I brought supplies." Ezra nodded toward his pack horse. "Enough to share, if you can stretch it." The little girl, Emma, he had heard Tommy call her, stepped closer to her mother's skirts. "Mama, I'm hungry." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Ezra watched her pride war with her children's need, saw the moment when maternal instinct won. She slipped the wedding ring back onto her finger with shaking hands. 3 days, she said finally. "You can stay 3 days, fix what needs fixing. Then you move on." "Yes, ma'am." But as Ezra unpacked his supplies and saw the children's faces transform at the sight of salt pork and cornmeal, he wondered if 3 days would be enough. Not for the barn, that would take weeks, but for whatever was growing in his chest as he watched Sarah's hands steady for the first time since he'd arrived. From the ridge above the cabin, dust rose against the autumn sky, riders moving fast and purposeful toward the valley below. Ezra's jaw tightened as he counted the distant figures. Some business, he knew, never stayed buried long. The sound of hoofbeats reached them like thunder rolling down from the high peaks, and Sarah's face went white as winter. She stood in her doorway, one hand gripping the frame, the other clutching Emma close. "Inside," she whispered to her children. But Tommy had already seen the riders cresting the hill, 3 men in black coats, their horses lathered with hard travel. Ezra straightened from where he'd been replacing a barn beam, his hands never moving far from the rifle propped against the wall. He'd spent enough years running from his own ghosts to recognize the shape of trouble when it came calling. "You know them?" he asked Sarah, keeping his voice low. "Bankmen," she breathed, "from Carson City." The lead rider pulled up in the yard, his horse dancing sideways as he surveyed the property with cold calculation. So Marcus Whelan wore authority like expensive cologne, too much of it, applied in all the wrong places. His companions flanked him like twin shadows, hands resting easy on their gun belts. "Mrs. McKenna," Whelan called out, not bothering to dismount. "I believe we had an arrangement." Sarah stepped onto the porch, chin lifted, despite the tremor in her voice. "I told you I needed more time." "Time's a luxury, ma'am. One your late husband couldn't afford." Whelan's smile was all teeth and no warmth. 3 months overdue on the loan. Property's been marked for seizure. Please, Sarah's pride finally cracked, desperation bleeding through. "My children will be better served in town, with proper families." Whelan finally dismounted, his boots hitting the dirt with finality. "You've got until sundown to gather your belongings." That's when Ezra stepped forward, moving with the liquid grace of a man accustomed to violence. "Might want to reconsider that timeline." Whelan's eyes shifted to the mountain man, taking in the weathered leather, the rifle, the way Ezra held himself like coiled steel. "This your property, friend?" "No, but it's not yours either." "Legal papers say otherwise." Whelan reached inside his coat, and Ezra's hand drifted toward his gun. "Signed and witnessed. Mrs. McKenna's husband borrowed against this land, and now payments come due." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Tommy appeared in the doorway behind his mother, clutching a kitchen knife with hands too small for such weight. Emma peered out from behind her brother, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Ezra looked at the family, this woman who'd offered her wedding ring for her children's lives, these kids who had learned hunger like a second language, and felt something shift inside his chest, like rocks settling after an avalanche. "What's the debt?" he asked quietly. $200, plus interest. Whelan's smile turned predatory. "You got that kind of money, mountain man?" Ezra reached into his coat, and everyone held their breath. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the weight of gold coins, payment for a winter's worth of pelts, meant to buy supplies for another year of solitude in the high country. $250, he said, tossing the pouch to Whelan. "That should cover interest." The banker's eyes widened as he hefted the weight. This settles the debt in full, but why would you—" "Good day, gentlemen." Ezra's voice carried the finality of stone grinding against stone. After the riders disappeared over the ridge, Sarah sank onto her porch steps like a marionette with cut strings. Her children gathered close, Tommy still clutching his knife, Emma burying her face in her mother's skirts. "Why?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't even know us." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, watching the dust settle in the yard. Finally, he pulled something from his pocket, a small tintype photograph, creased and faded. A woman and 2 children, their faces bright, with love and hope. "Had a family once," he said, his voice rusty with old grief. "Wife, son, daughter. Fever took them while I was up in the mountains, trapping beaver. Came home to 3 graves and a world that didn't make sense anymore." Sarah took the photograph with gentle hands, studying the faces of strangers who might have been her own children in another life. "I'm sorry. Spent 20 years thinking I could have saved them if I'd been there. Maybe I could have, maybe not." Ezra settled onto the steps beside her, his massive frame somehow less intimidating in the gathering dusk. "But I'm here now." Emma lifted her head from her mother's skirts, looking at Ezra with new understanding. "Are you going to stay?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Ezra looked at this broken family he had somehow inherited, at the cabin that needed a man's touch, at the children who needed more than just food to survive the coming winter. "Your barn's still falling down," he said finally. "Might take a while to fix it proper." Tommy stepped closer, his young face serious. "You could teach me about fixing things." "Reckon I could." Sarah's hand found Ezra's weather seam, her wedding ring catching the last light of day. For the first time in months, she smiled, really smiled, like dawn breaking over mountain peaks. But happiness, Ezra knew, was often the most fragile thing in a hard world. The work took 3 weeks, not 3 days. Each morning, Ezra rose before dawn to milk the cow he'd bought in town, to check the chickens he'd added to the coop, to build the life he'd never thought he'd want again. Tommy shadowed his every move, learning to plane wood and drive nails straight, absorbing the quiet lessons that fathers pass to sons. Emma appointed herself supervisor of all projects, her corn husk doll regaining its missing arm, thanks to Sarah's careful stitching and Ezra's whittled replacement. The little girl's laughter filled the cabin like music, chasing away the echoes of hunger and fear that had haunted these walls. On the day the barn was finished, Sarah found Ezra on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. She'd put on her best dress, the blue one she'd worn to church before the world fell apart, and her hair was clean and bright as wheat. "I was thinking," she said, settling beside him with the easy companionship they'd built over shared meals and honest work, "about what you said, about being here now." Ezra turned to study her face in the dying light. "And? Tommy needs a father. Emma needs someone to read her stories. And she took a breath that seemed to draw in all the courage she had left. "I need a partner. Someone who sees work that needs doing and does it. Someone who understands that family isn't just blood. It's choice." The mountain man was quiet for a long moment, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Finally, he reached for her hand, thumb tracing the gold band she still wore. "Keep it," he said softly, "but maybe make room for another." Their wedding was simple, just the preacher from town and a handful of neighbors who'd watched this unlikely family grow from desperation into something beautiful. Tommy stood proud as Ezra's best man, while Emma scattered wildflowers and declared herself the bestest helper ever. Years later, when gray touched Sarah's hair and lines mapped the laughter around Ezra's eyes, she would tell her grandchildren about the day. A mountain man came down from the high country and found a family he didn't know he was looking for. About how sometimes the richest payment isn't gold, but the chance to matter to someone again. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Ezra would look across the table at his wife and remember that the best treasures aren't found in mountain streams or hidden caves. They're built with calloused hands and patient hearts, one day at a time, until loneliness becomes a memory and home becomes everything. The last light faded behind the peaks, leaving stars scattered like promises across the endless sky.